Hi, I'm Jeff Sweet. I want to continue exploring this idea that characters with some dimension don't speak with just one voice, but rather they speak with multiple, often distinct voices, and that every voice that a character uses represents a different facet of that character, a different role that character plays. And each facet, each role, may have indeed its own objective, which means that one part of the character is going for this, one part of the character is going for that, which further means that characters may be at war with themselves, which is an idea I've introduced earlier, but I want to explore this in a little more depth. I call this phenomenon roles in conflict. If you have a character who is torn between at least two deeply held roles, part of the action of your play will concern their discovering which is their truest role, embracing that role, making a choice based on embracing it, and then meeting the fate that follows. One of my favorite plays that deals with this pattern, uses this pattern, is The Heiress. Ruth and Augustus Getz is a free adaptation of Henry James's novel Washington Square. The lead character, Catherine Sloper, spends much of the story torn between two conflicting roles. On the one hand, she is her father's daughter, obedient, shy, and submissive. Her father, Dr. Sloper, he's a cold, autocratic guy, absolutely unsentimental and suspicious of the world. He's a rich guy, has some cause to be, but his manner, his only slightly disguised contempt for his daughter has undermined her confidence, beaten her down. So around him she acts and speaks very, very shyly, very tentatively. Catherine's other role is as the object of the attentions of a young man named Morris, who starts to court her. And she's thrilled that she's got this handsome young man paying attention to her. And in his company, with his encouragement, we begin to see other sides of her, sides brought to life by Morris's attention. We see that she actually possesses some wit, and we see a smile that her father has never seen. The problem is that Dr. Sloper believes that Morris's attentions to Catherine are not based on her endearing qualities so much as the money Catherine will inherit. He thinks that Morris is a fraud, a fortune seeker, and he tells Catherine she's going to have to choose between being his daughter or giving herself to Morris. And to be his daughter, she would have to refuse to be hoodwinked, dismiss Morris from her life. If she chooses Morris, he tells her he will disinherit her. Morris knows that Dr. Sloper can't stand him, but he initially hopes or believes that after they elope, the doctor will choose to make peace. But when Catherine tells him that she knows that the doctor will not relent and that she's prepared to be disinherited, Morris takes this in, and on the night when he's supposed to pick her up for their elopement, he doesn't show. Dr. Sloper initially believes the fact that she hasn't run off means that she has come to her senses. He tells her how much he admires her. He says basically, "Good, you've stood up for yourself." And she snaps back. She says, "Oh, no, I've been stood up." Dr. Sloper soon discovers that he is dying, and he tries to make some kind of connection with his death, but it's too late. He does indeed die with them estranged, and she inherits all his money. And Morris pops up again. He's hoping to get things started again. And she gives him some encouragement. She dissembles. He proposes that he go off and find a carriage so that they can run off and elope that night. As soon as he leaves, she has the door bolted. Her silly romantic aunt, Lavinia, says, "Can you be so cruel?" And Catherine replies, "Oh, I can be very cruel. I have been taught by masters." Morris comes back with the carriage, but as he's pounding on the front door, she is going up to bed. And he stands there at the end, pounding on the door in frustration. And that's the end of the story. Eventually, she ends up rejecting both her role as the dutiful daughter and her role as the naive object of Morris's attentions, and she finds a new role. She becomes her own master. But you kind of suspect that she will never trust anybody sufficiently to enter into another relationship. So in a sense, this new role is kind of a tragedy because she is walling herself off emotionally from the possibility of ever having love in her life. So there are the three faces of Catherine: daughter, would-be lover, and finally avenging angel. In fact, at the end of the story, when she's dealing with Morris in the terrific film that William Wyler directed based on the play, Olivia de Havilland, in those last scenes of the film, pitches her voice considerably deeper than we have heard her speak in before. She has, in fact, found a new voice to go with the new role that she has found. I've gone on at length about the Heiress to illustrate a point, which is that one of the purposes of supporting characters in a play is to elicit different voices from the central character, to help identify different facets of the central character, different roles. And indeed, Dr. Sloper and Morris bring out different voices from Catherine. There's a theater game that I sometimes use when I'm teaching. I call it 6 lines. I have different variations of the game, but one variation I particularly like to use is one in which you have somebody who is in every scene playing the same character, and all the other people play people around that character, people in that character's life. So all of the scenes, as the name of the game might suggest, are 6 lines long. And the other people initiate each of these 6-line scenes with the central character. If let's say Al is a central character, actor B says something to Al, Al replies to B replies to Al replies to B says something back to Al, and Al finishes the scene with a final reply. And then actor C comes in, and D, E, F, whatever, and repeats this pattern, always initiating a series of 6-line scenes. Well, when we do this right, the central character, in this case Al, retains their character. But the different other actors who approach Al will elicit different aspects of Al's life. One actor may initiate a scene as Al's employer, another as an employee, another as a lover, another as a child or a rival or a doctor or a lawyer or a cop or anything. But although Al, the central character, will always respond with a voice that is identifiably Al's, there will be a difference in that voice. A subtle difference in each voice, depending on who Al is talking to, who the other characters are. The whole point of that the other characters bring out the different aspects, the different voices, the different variations of Al's voice in response to their initiation. I think that you'll find in your own life that you don't speak with one voice. You speak with different voices as appropriate. And in fact, you don't just have one voice per person. You are likely to have several voices for a single person with whom you have a complex relationship. I'll give you an example from my life. My mom, as she was getting on, my mother loved to deal with me as if I were still young and in need of her guidance. And I remember telling her at one point I was going to have an important appointment. Maybe it was with a producer, and she instantly said, "So what are you going to wear?" And I said, "Well, I thought maybe clothes." And she said, "Oh, don't be a smartass. What are you going to wear?" And I said, "Well, I'm not going to get too terribly dressed up. Just like normal." And she says, "A tie?" And I say, "No, I don't think so." And she says, "What about your shoes? You're not going to wear sneakers, are you?" And I say, "If I feel comfortable wearing sneakers, I'll probably wear sneakers." And she says, "You don't go to a serious, important appointment with wearing sneakers. They'll offer to pay you less if you wear sneakers." I mean, obviously I was teasing her, and finally I gave her what she wanted. I capitulated. I committed to wearing the tie and committed to wearing, grown-up shoes. But as you might guess, I said a lot of this in order to have the fun of giving her license to lecture me, because at this point she was a pretty old lady living in assisted living. So, I thought, it'd give her a sense of having some agency, some power by giving me this lecture on my appearance. And I probably talked to her with a younger voice, something that might have sounded like me when I was a younger age, because rather than when I was in my 50s, when we would have these conversations. But there was a certain point when my parents hit an emergency. My father had a stroke, from which, thank God, he recovered like 99%. But my parents at the time were living in a remote area of North Carolina that was not easy to get to in case of emergency. So my brother and I told my parents, you have to move. You guys have to move within 15 minutes of one of us. Well, my brother lived in Washington, D.C., and I live in New York, and my parents decided that they would move to Silver Spring, Maryland, which was an easy reach of where my brother was living. But when my brother and I talked to my parents like that, all of a sudden we became essentially their parents. We were telling them firmly something that they had to do. We were using a voice of authority that they had to obey, essentially. Obviously this was a big contrast to the voice that I used when I let my mother lecture me about the sneakers. One voice with my mother in one circumstance, another voice with my mother in another circumstance. So that's because we indeed have different voices when we have complex relationships. One of my favorite scenes that illustrates this point is in Clute, a film written by Andy and Dave Lewis, directed by Alan J. Pakula. It's a thriller. Donald Sutherland plays Clute, who's a cop, who is trying to get information from a call girl named Bree Daniel, played by Jane Fonda, that may solve the mystery of the disappearance of a friend of his. So he has evidence that she has violated the terms of her parole, and he uses this evidence, the threat of sending her back to jail, to compel her to respond to his questions. So there's this scene, big long scene. And she starts to respond to him, and she responds in a variety of voices. She starts off resentful, understandably. Then she shifts, and she sounds sort of amused by his naivete. I mean, he's this, from her perspective, a country bumpkin, and she's a big city broad who knows the score. And she's going to, school him a little. And then she shifts. She gets angry at his intrusion into her privacy, and then she is a little apologetic for getting angry. Then she goes into sort of a light satiric mode in which she compares the cost of an evening with her with, what it would cost to buy a washer dryer. Then she begins to flirt. Then when she learns that he has witnessed her encounter with an old man who never touches her, she becomes outraged on the old man's behalf. And then, as she is pressed to relate some of her recent experiences, which have been a little scary, a little mysterious, she can't help but shudder with fear. There's a phone call. She answers the phone, and it turns out it's from a potential client. And we hear her voice with him, which is, affable, jokey, and in control of the conversation, her professional voice. Okay, I'm not going to go through every beat and change in that scene, but while Sutherland's tone of voice, Clute's voice, remains constant, she is basically auditioning a dozen or so persona, trying to find out the one that will mollify him and neutralize the threat that he poses to her. It's a master class, both in scene conception and in screen acting. It's not for nothing that Fonda won the Oscar playing this part. As a matter of fact, now that I think of it, Olivia de Havilland won the Oscar for the Heiress, so maybe we're on to something here. Maybe characters with multiple voices tend to have tour de force roles that shows what actors can do. Anyway, to return to the central idea, the idea is that complex characters, speak with multiple voices, and the crux of your play is probably going to be focused on the character finding out which of the voices that they use in your play, which ends up being their truest voice. because drama generally builds to a point at which the central character is compelled to make their most important choice, and in making that choice, they will speak in their truest voice. And that's how the audience comes to figure out who they truly are. Well, choice only exists when you have more than one option, so giving a character multiple voices gives them great complexity and makes them more fascinating. Sometime, try counting how many voices Hamlet speaks in.